Hello everyone, it's David Swinowski with Rubble Road Soapstone Kits, and today we're going to work on the small 2D shark. So in this kit, we have a little bag with 3 pieces of sandpaper, some finishing oil in there, that's the finishing kit. We also have the small shark silhouette right here. So I've got a small bin with some water in it, not a lot of water, just enough to rinse the piece of stone I have. I'm going to open up my finishing kit. The oil is the last thing we're going to need here, so I'm going to set that off to the side as well. You may have some instructions with our kits as well. 3 pieces of sandpaper, 2 of them should be like a blue back. We're going to start off with this coarse mesh to begin. Well, we're going to use the water here to control the dust, and then we're going to do some shaping on this piece of stone with the coarse mesh. So if you swim on in here, I'll show you how I carve the small 2D shark. So we have the stone shark shape here. Now we have 2 different fin options on the front. If you look at the shape itself, we have the dorsal fin on the top of the head on the front, and we've got 2 front pectoral fins here if we want either one of them. I usually like to get rid of the front one to elongate the head, and I can do a little bit more shaping on that, then the back fins and then the tail fins as well. So first thing I do is I actually get rid of that very front fin, but if you want to have it so that there's 2 front fins, that's your option on here, or if you want to remove the back fin to have the 1 front fin forward. So I'm going to fold my sandpaper in half, and when I fold it in half, I'm going to use the closed end to do my carving. I'm going to have the open end towards my hand. And for this, I'm just going to get rid of that extra piece. And I'm going back and forth like a saw, chewing my way through this stone. And with the soapstone, you would find it really quite slippery, especially when it was dry. And actually gets its name from its texture, the way it feels in its natural state. So there is no soap in this stone. So real rock from the ground. Softest one you're going to find. So soft, you can scratch that rock with your thumbnail. That's how soft it is. So you can see I'm almost all the way through that front fin right now. So if I wanted to, I could just snap that right off. And now I've kind of elongated the head of my shark. I'm going to get rid of that little lip. I'm just going to sand it off. You'll find the thumb technique works really good. Just put the thumb on that spot you want to get rid of and just scrub back and forward, right? Get rid of it. You can go in a circle if you want to. But I found by using my thumb on that little spot, it really is amazing how much pressure you can get on that concentrated little spot to get rid of those little pesky edges. So we got down to the 1 fin. What I'm going to do now is create the streamlined body on the shark, and that is like the basic body shape. I'm going to outline that by going along the dorsal fin, pointing to the back of the tail, almost the middle. The middle on these, it might be not exactly where mine is, right? Not every single piece of soapstone because is exactly the same. So it might be a little off to the side, but I just want to make sure. And if I'm going to narrow all of these fins on the top, it's going to leave enough of the body segment in the middle. I want to kind of narrow fins to create some streamlining on this piece of stone here today. And with the stone carving, we're always removing stone. We're never adding anything. So when we want something to stick out a little bit more, we kind of have to leave it alone and remove the existing stone around it. And again, I'm just using that ridge here. I might even just kind of cup that just to fold it a little bit, get a little bit of a curve in the sandpaper itself. So you can kind of see the outlines where I'm tapering, almost like a V shape towards the back of the tail. Now I'm going to want to really scrub on the bottom ones. I want to leave the front pectoral fin a little bit. I can actually create a little extra depth on this piece, but for the tail fin and the bottom fins here, I'm going to want to scrub those two and try and lower those down. It's just constant contact, constant pressure on the stone itself with your sandpaper here. Do a lot of rinsing. Like an otter when I'm carving, I'm going to flip my sandpaper around and use the opposite corner. It's starting to kind of fold up on me, so I'm going to move my sandpaper around so it works the best for me. And as we kind of carve in, it's going to raise up. The body's going to kind of start to raise out of that stone the more we get rid of it. And because this stone is a metamorphic rock, we are going to get some variances in the hardness in this rock. They're not all going to be exactly the same. So if you do any amount of soapstone carving, you're going to notice there's a bit of a range in the hardness of these stones. And that's going to be dependent upon the minerals that are in this stone. When it forms, it's a metamorphic rock. It's gone through changes with heat and pressure. So because of that, some of these have had more heat and more pressure than others. They'll be a little bit harder, a little bit denser. So with those ones that did not get as much of that heat and pressure, they're going to be a little bit easier to carve. You might be able to get rid of this stone a little bit quicker. And this one's kind of in the middle, so other ones might take a little bit longer as well. So I kind of hold this up. You might notice I'm really kind of cutting in on an angle there, getting rid of quite a bit of stone on these bottom fins here, and then on that tail fin. I'm really trying, other than marking the body line on the front fin, that's all I've really done to it. It's still almost the same thickness that it was when we started. So it's a pretty good start for now. Now I'm going to work on the top side. I'm going to carve the pectoral fin, and the back fin, and then also tail fin as well. And if you want to, you can always open up your sandpaper, refold it in a new spot. And what this is going to do is going to give you a nice new edge to work with. And then you can use that and just continue shaping. So it's not going to be one or two little pushes, it's going to be enough. It's going to take a bit of repetition. Even though it's the softest rock out there, it's still a rock. It's going to take some time. Just being consistent with it, that's what's more important. And as you're scrubbing into this stone, all that rock we're getting rid of, it'll try and jam up your sandpaper. So that's why I do a lot of rinsing. Once that sandpaper fills up, it doesn't work as well. So if we rinse that out, keep the dust out of it, it will be working better for you. And add some shape to the tail right now. So you can start thinking about if you want to incorporate some movement, like an S shape, into the tail section. If you want to, you can always draw in pencil the kind of a line you want to hold with the tail shape, and then just make sure you're leaving enough stone there that it's not too thin. We don't want to go too thin on any of the fins themselves, whether they're the top fin or the tail fins. Or underneath, got to leave a little bit behind just to hold that structural integrity of the rock itself. It's pretty soft stone, so. So I'm just going to try and match up the little triangle point here with the exact middle of that tail. I want to kind of match it up. It's just about symmetry for me on this one. I can still make that dorsal fin a little bit thinner. Now we're just going to try and match up these two lines that we're carving on the outline of the body. We're going to try and match those two lines up on the other side of the fish. So again, if you want to take a look at it, okay, this is the line I want to follow. I'm kind of following all those fins right there, right to about the middle of the tail. So the middle of the tail, make sure you're covering those fins. And if it's not exact, it's not a big deal. You can always kind of match it up as you actually carve a little bit further into the stone itself. So I try not to carve into the front of the pectoral fin too much. You can always use more of the back end of that sandpaper to try and avoid it completely. And now I'll start the other fin just to try and line up the two lines. See how my symmetry is working out. So for this other one, more along the top. And again, should be roughly towards the middle of that tail, right? Curve in here a little bit. If you want to refold your paper to get a new edge for this one as well, you might want to. Just take a look. So I'm looking where the points meet up, pretty close, and then where the edges here meet up by the fins. And those are both going to be pretty close. So you know what? I think it'll be good enough for this. I will carve into that stone and commit to those lines I've put into the stone. I'm primarily using my thumb pressure on the back. Might flip my sandpaper back and forth. As it starts to get more saturated, it becomes a bit more flexible as well. If it gets too flexible, you can always fold it twice to make it a little bit thicker and make that a little bit stronger. So hold that shape a little bit better. Pull it all the way if you want to. Just dig into that. So we really want to make sure we're controlling the amount of pressure we're putting on that dorsal fin. If we're pushing too hard, it could be prone to snapping. Same on the tail section, you know, it's pretty narrow in here to keep that streamlined shark shape. So we want to be aware of how much pressure we're putting on a couple of the key points on this stone as well. Just a good, comfortable grip, nice support underneath. I'm just trying to use the edge of my sandpaper like a saw, sawing its way in there. Once I get a groove started, it's almost like a train on the track. It'll just chew its way into that stone. And then I'll just kind of concentrate on evening out that groove into the tail fin. If you want for better stability, you can always leave the bottom of the tail fin the widest and then taper the top part if you wanted to. That way when it kind of sits, it'll still maintain balance for you as well, so you can display that. I'm just trying to get rid of that real blocky kind of edge that was in there. It was more like just a trench cut into that stone, so I'm just trying to taper that out. I also don't want to make this too thin above, right? Work on these top fins a little bit more. The more you play with it, the more you realize what you can kind of do with the stone. Kind of tolerances you can get away with, right? When you're working on the thinner little bits here, it is good to just be a little bit more gentle. I'm just trying to get the sandpaper to do the work for me. I'm just keeping it in contact with the stone. All right. So we can definitely see the main body shape of my shark on both sides of the stone. I've narrowed that dorsal fin quite a bit. I'm not going to get much thinner on that with this paper. I might just finish that dorsal fin up with sandpaper number 2, but I'll leave it for now and concentrate on the other parts of the carving I still want to do. I want to streamline the body, so I'm going to get rid of some of the edges here. I'm also going to round that off, but I want to kind of help these pectoral fins kind of flare out. So I'm going to put a couple grooves around the outside just to kind of frame the pectoral fins on the shark itself. I'm going to fold that in a different spot. And if I start to round out the body in behind it, I make my groove directly behind that front fin. And then once I've got that groove started, then I'm going to start to round off the belly in behind it towards the tail, towards the back end of the fish itself. And we'll also do that along the edge of the back. I like to try and keep it thicker by the pectoral fins, and then I kind of taper the back end. I make that a little bit narrower on both sides. Just a little bit more streamlined. And as we start to round off those square edges on the body, we may need to kind of redo those side body lines. On the side, they might start to disappear, the lateral side of the fish itself. So you might have to carve those back in, making it a little bit narrower, and that's fine. I'm kind of working right on those square edges. I'm trying to round off and taper the back end of the shark here. I always try and make sure I'm staying above my bucket, so if I accidentally drop my stone, it'll just fall right back into the water. A little bit softer landing than the hard floor. Plus, with my hands always above my bucket, the only place the water can drip is back into the bucket. And now, as we're working here, you're going to notice anywhere where I've done any carving, you're kind of seeing the natural colors of these stones coming through. If I haven't even scrubbed there or carved, you can actually see some tooling marks, or almost like a gray stripe pattern on the stone itself. As we're shaping our stone, we're getting rid of it. But even if I'm not getting to it yet, I want to make sure I get rid of any of that gray striping all over my carving. I want to make sure that stuff is gone. So I'm going to try and get in all the little nooks and crannies here on the stone itself. Make sure I get rid of all those tooling marks and help bring out the natural color of this stone. I find stone carving, it's kind of like having a picture that's out of focus. And once we start to smooth it out with sandpaper number 2, we're going to start to see natural colors and patterns in our stone that we couldn't see before. And it doesn't take much to get rid of that striping pattern. And if you see even faint lines, even if they're just a little bit, I want to make sure I get rid of them with sandpaper number 1. All the hard work is done with this first sandpaper. If we do a nice job with it and we're nice and consistent with the texture on the outside of our stone when we're finished with sandpaper 1, sandpaper 2 is actually going to be easier. And then because sandpaper 2 is easier, once we're done with that, when we're consistent with that, sandpaper 3 is actually the fastest. It's all about setting it up for the process we're going through here today. Doesn't matter what rock you're going to carve, it's always a process. It's not just one thing you do. The nice thing with the soapstone, because it's a softer stone, we only need 3 steps. And it can be pretty effective on this rock. The harder that rock is, the more steps there are in that process. And also, you'd have to get into some different tools as well. Gonna center up that dorsal fin a little bit. It's a little bit wonky off to the side. Just gonna straighten that out. Because sandpaper 1 is the coarsest, it does the most amount of shaping, most effectively for you. One technique, just getting rid of those gray stripes. That's all I'm doing. If the stone were thicker, I might consider splitting the front pectoral fins. But as that's a bit of a narrower stone, kind of leave them the way they are, just to leave the structure as strong as possible. I'm going to carve a little bit in front of those fins as well. I'm just going to eliminate that little groove I put in there before when I was creating the body line. Pretty good. A little bit on this side. Should be good. Now we can actually carve a notch in here. So it's like the shark has an open mouth. So I'm going to find myself a new piece of sandpaper. I'm going to fold that the opposite direction to give me a nice new ridge here. And back and forth. Roughly in the center. And how deep do you make it? Well, it's kind of up to you. It's kind of like a whale shark. Kind of narrow, right? If you want, you can always point the nose as well. So it's more like a great white shark, mako shark. I am going to bring that groove back just a little bit more. Your mouth. Saw, right? Back and forth. Trying to keep that movement as straight as I can. So now I'm going to open it up so it's a little bit narrower still. I had it folded about 3 times there, and I'm just going to fold it once. Let's try and make a nice narrow groove at the back of the mouth. Kind of pinch my sandpaper, try and get it as flat as I can. Work on this last little bit. And that's fine. It's probably pretty good. You can see it's there, right? Chop, chop, chop. I'm going to taper the head a little bit. I'm going to make the nose a little bit pointier on this guy too. Okay. And where would those gills be? I know there's, what, 5 of them on the shark. We can just make one good gill. If you want to, you could always use like a pin or a nail and draw the gills on your shark after you're done. Even draw the teeth on it. And then those will all stick out as like a bolder white line. So there'll be a nice contrast in the stone that you'll be able to see. And it'll also add some added detail to your shark as well. It could just be wide like this one, like a bull shark, tiger shark. All different kinds, right? So I'm just kind of finishing up the shape around the head of my shark. Before I'm going to go to sandpaper number 2, I want to really make sure I'm happy with the shape of my stone before I start to smooth out and get rid of the scratches that I'm making with this current sandpaper. See a couple of those gray stripes. I'm going to get rid of those when I see them. That's where the rinsing really comes in handy. The more you kind of rinse it, the more you're going to be able to see any of those little areas that you might have overlooked there a couple minutes ago when you were getting rid of all that other stone. Move it around, check it from different angles, right? Really take a look. For the tail, I can just split that right like that. Try and carve 2 sides at the same time. Getting close. Quite a few stubborn little grooves underneath that edge. There. They're gone now. That's good. Try to get a good grip on my stone when I'm carving. I won't drop it a lot. Just carving in on the side of the head for where the gill plate is, and where the gills start. Just to kind of create that effect in the stone itself. And I'm going to get rid of the raised up stone in behind. I'm just going to try and smooth that out in behind. And I'm going to leave those pectoral fins alone. I really want those to kind of stand out a little bit, you know. Some pressure. Now my sandpaper is really quite pliable. It really folds and forms really well. Move that carving around, check it out from different angles. Take a look at it. Getting pretty close right now, almost there. Just kind of carving into the body. I really want the head to kind of stick out a little bit where those gills are. I also want those pectoral fins to stick out a little bit too. Try using a new section of your sandpaper. As we use it, kind of wearing it down as we're using it. Really tapering the body of the shark down by the tail. So I'm kind of might be moving my hands quickly, but I'm not pushing super hard right now. Being quite gentle. Open this up so I can really try and taper the head on this guy. Look at it from the front. I'm just trying to narrow the face on this one right now. Point that nose on the upper and the lower jaw. I'll often turn it and look at it from the very front so it's facing me, so I can kind of determine where the center line is on the face and then try and match my angles up on either side. Round that bottom chin off. Look at it. And really rinse it off, make sure I can get a good look. Getting close, getting really close. Just more on that bottom jaw for me right now. I'm getting really close though. Pretty close. Pretty happy with that. Bottom jaw tapered. It's pretty close to the center. Looks like it's turned a little bit, but I'm okay with that. So I'm just taking a second glance at my shark right now. I'm looking for any of these corners or edges here where they kind of two saw lines meet up. I want to make sure that I'm getting down to the bottom of those. I want to make sure I'm not leaving any of those gray stripes anywhere, and there's a ton of little pockets for those things to hide. Got a bunch hiding here, so I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to leave the bottom of my tail a little bit wider, so now I'm going to add the definition to the top of the dorsal fin. And now it should be done. And where you might find it easier is to draw a line on the back of the tail for the kind of lines you want that to follow. Just being careful, I'm supporting it really well underneath so that when I'm pushing together, I'm not putting too much pressure on the tail of my shark. I really want to make sure I got good support on these as I work on them. And again, not pushing hard, just enough to keep my sandpaper kind of flattish on the surface of that stone. That's it. So I'm just going to kind of lay it into my palm. Get some work done on that side. You can always check to see how well the balance is. Still pretty good as long as it's standing, right? I'm gonna get rid of some of that ridge on the top here. It's a little bit too thick. Just want to narrow that up a little bit. Like I said, this is the hardest part, shaping your rock. Once we're finished shaping it, then the next two sandpapers will actually be pretty quick. Doing all the hard work now. I'm going to hold my sandpaper still and just scrub my stone against it. Flatten that out a little bit. If you wanted, you can even use your sandpaper, some grooves in the tail if you wanted to. Put a couple grooves right here. I find I can always pinch it a little bit flatter right by the corners. Do that. Make sure to keep a grip on it. Just move my pinch along the sandpaper. And A couple little grooves in the rock here. So I'm gonna put that into focus. Double check in, looking for any of those gray stripes, making sure I get rid of those. Not bad. I like it. You happy with it? I think I'm going to go to sandpaper number 2. So we take sandpaper 1 out. Sandpaper 2 is the one that says P320 on the back. 600 grit is going to be the very final step. Sometimes there might be a piece of 400 grit in there. 400 will be fine, but just remember that the 600 grit is the last. So now we're going to get rid of those little scratches we left behind with sandpaper number 1. And if we're pretty consistent with sandpaper number 1, it shouldn't be too hard with sandpaper number 2. But we want to make sure as we go to sandpaper 2 and 3 that we don't scrub our soapstone on the bottom of the bucket. And the reason is that first sandpaper we used. As we use this paper, every time we folded it, we lost grit. You'll see areas on that sandpaper where the grit is gone. It's all at the bottom of the bucket now. This is silicon carbide. It's harder than the soapstone that we're carving. So if we're scrubbing our soft soapstone against that carbide grit, it will be putting scratches into our carving. So I usually put my hand underneath and then just rinse off my carving. I might even use my sandpaper almost like a cloth to wipe it off as well. So sandpaper 2, let's get rid of those little scratches that we don't want. Lots of rinsing. And this is where we're going to notice a big textural difference as well. It's going to start to get much smoother. That picture out of focus trim is going to come up now because now we're going to start to see colors in our stone a little bit clearer. Now we're starting to smooth that rock out. Texture is getting much, much smoother. And those natural colors are coming through. So now we still have one more piece of sandpaper. The last sandpaper doesn't really get rid of scratches, doesn't do any shaping. All it really does is just smooth that existing surface that we have. So all the scratches that you don't want to see have to be gone before you go to stage 3. And just like sandpaper number 1, we can fold up sandpaper number 2, tuck it into those hard to reach areas, get everywhere as best as possible. You can do a little bit of shaping as well with sandpaper number 2. It is coarse enough. The stone is that soft enough as well. So I can also finish up the shape on my dorsal fin right now, as well as start to polishing it. So now I just want to try and make sure it's fairly straight up and down, right? Not too wonky one way or the other, not too thick on one side or the other. And this one's, it's not bad. It looks pretty good. If it was still out quite a bit, I might just go back to sandpaper number 1 just to help shape it a little bit easier to get it to where I need it to be. I'm not just sanding on the main sides. I want to get all along the top, all the little spots everywhere. If I want to see the natural beauty of this stone, the only way to do that is to sand it out so I can see it. So I'm going to sand this everywhere. I do a fair bit of rinsing when I'm carving it with the coarse mesh. I do quite a bit more when I'm sanding it with sandpaper 2 and 3. because I find that with sandpaper number 2, the more I rinse it, the better actual finish I get on my carving, because it shows me every little spot where I haven't gotten it yet. And I find I get the best sanded finish. I'm going to do a lot more rinsing. And I'm always rinsing my sandpaper when I'm rinsing my stone. Try and keep my sandpaper as dust free as I can, so it's working as effectively as possible. For these thinner fins, kind of supporting them underneath as I use my sandpaper and do a thumb technique on top. Just try and do the best job possible, right? Don't always make my sharks perfectly smooth. Sometimes they got in battles with giant squid and octopi. So sometimes they have some battle scars. If we were nice and consistent with sandpaper number 1, sandpaper 2 shouldn't be that long. Should be pretty quick. And if we're nice and consistent and even with sandpaper number 2, sandpaper 3 will be even faster. So you can also use your hands, feel, see if you've missed any spots. And once you're happy with it, you can go stage 3. All the scratches you don't want to see have to be gone before you go to stage 3. I'm pretty close. I'm pretty happy with that. Natural colors are coming through. I'm seeing some of those natural patterns in the stone, little spots. And blobs of different color as well, all caused by the different minerals that are in the stone with that metamorphic process. Now I'm going to go to stage 3, 600 grit, goes in the water as well. We're using water for everything. And a quick once over. So sandpaper number 3 is almost twice as smooth as sandpaper number 2, so it should feel like glass when we're done. Everywhere. One more time. And when I'm completely finished, I'm going to go rinse this carving off in clean water to get this dusty water off it. Then I'm going to let it sit and dry overnight to make sure it's nice and dry before I add that final oil. Because we were using water here, we have to give it that time to dry. I find overnight is usually just fine, just fine. So, up in between. You can also fold up sandpaper number 3 as well. Use that. You can also do the texture on that. Should feel like glass. Feels good. Looks pretty awesome too. sure I really get underneath there. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Making sure I've got a good grip on it now. If I'm looking at it, put all this hard work into there, I want to make sure I've got a good grip on this so I don't accidentally drop it on the floor. I like it. I'm going to go rinse this off and I'm going to dry it before I do the oiling process, okay? All right, so now that our shark has been rinsed, had time to dry, now we're going to finish up and oil. So, take the oil out of the package. I'm going to oil one side. I'm going to flip it and oil the other side. Use a Q-tip into all those little nooks and crannies. And just paint the rock with the oil. Nice liberal coating. And when it dried, it went kind of back to that grayish color it was when we first started, when it was in its raw state. And now that we're adding this oil, all the natural colors are coming out. And they should stay out. So turn that rock around. I'm going to flip it before I get it coated in oil everywhere. So I got that one side really well. And I'm going to finish up on the opposite side. I'm going to let this sit for about 2 hours, and then I'll just wipe it up with the paper towel and get rid of all the excess oil that's sitting on it, maybe in the corners here, right? I just want to make sure I've got a nice coating of the oil everywhere. Sit in a sunny window if you can. It really doesn't have to be. Anywhere is good. Well ventilated. You want to make sure that you did a good job of rinsing them beforehand too. You don't want any of that dust stuck on the rock, so that when the oil dries, when you wipe it off, it might cause a scratch, or it might just flake off and leave a little pit mark on your stone, and that just won't look good either. So that's why you really want to make sure you have a clean, dry surface before oiling. Pretty happy with that. It's pretty good. I'm going to let this sit for a couple hours, and then I'm going to wipe off that excess oil. And there we have the small 2D soapstone shark from the kit here. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Hope you had some fun while you were carving it. I hope you got some interesting colors in your kit as well. If you'd like to see other tips and tricks that we have here at Rubble Road, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. We have great photos, great videos that could help you with your carving as well. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm David Swanowski.